with golden soil and wealth. Our home is turned by sea, our land of vast in ancient streets, our beauty rich and rare. In history's age, let every state advance Australia fair. In joyful strains that let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Guests, teachers, parents and students, please be seated. We gather here today to represent our school community in remembering those who have fought and died in war. This commemorative service allows us to make connections between the past and our lives.
In the 120 years since Federation, Australians have fought and died in many fields of action, from Gallipoli to Vietnam, from Dunkirk to New Guinea, in campaigns of Crete, Alalim, Kokoda, Korea, and Malaya. To recently, our soldiers have been involved in actions in Timor-Leste, Afghanistan, and the Gulf. We also remember our men and women who are serving at this present time or in other parts of the world. On this day, above all days, we remember those men and women who died or suffered in the great tragedy of war. On the 1st of November 1914, the first convoy of Australia and New Zealand troops departed from King George Sound in Albany, eventually bound for Gallipoli. These Anzacs created a legend that when retold today evokes pride and passions in the new generations of Australians and New Zealanders. The first Anzac Day March was held in 1916, exactly 1 year after the first troops landed in Gallipoli, at what is now known as Anzac Cove. It was, and still is, a day of remembering those who fought in wars to keep us safe.
Each year we pay homage not only to those original Anzacs, but to all who died or were injured in the service to this country. They enrich our nation's history. Their hope was for the freedom of mankind, and we remember with pride their courage, their compassion, and their comradeship. They served on land, sea, and in the air, in many places throughout the world. Not only do we honour the memory of those Australians who have fallen in battle, we share the sorrow of those who have mourned them, and all who have been the victims of armed conflict. In Room 12, Year 6, students have been learning about descriptive poetry using emotive language. Sarang, Meta, and Wape will now present poems they have written to commemorate Anzac Day.
Rain splatters on an empty ground. We are left waiting. Young men dreaming to be heroes. They fell, fulfilling their dreams. Remember, the young men training. Nothing is left anymore, except the souls of the soldiers in a field of red poppies. The ghosts of the soldiers are free, and those spirits lurk inside us. We don't need to be left waiting anymore, lest we forget.
As dawn slowly breaks, Anzac soldiers hurry to wake, preparing for brutal combat, throwing their fears away. Entering King George Sound, some look back for the last time, absorbing the last of home as brass horns begin to blare. On the shores of Gallipoli, they are greeted with gunfire. Soldiers fall tragically as plans begin to backfire. Those soldiers made sacrifices when the country was in crisis. Thousands of lives were lost when we look back and count the costs. Now a field of ever-growing red covers the land and all their beds, to honour those who lost their lives, lest we forget.
As young soldiers march along to war, waving to their families goodbye, bravely taking one step on Gallipoli beach, marching into the dark, scary trenches, hoping all will end in a blink. As young wives look at pictures of their husbands, hoping they will come back safe and sound. But as the young men face their opponents, they crumble down at hope at the end they'll be at home enjoying their lives. Lest we forget.
Can Eva and Hannah from room 15 please come forward to recite the poems they have written in class?
The telegram. The dreaded telegram came. My raging spirit was not able to tame. My brother wasn't going to come home with a beating heart. This news made my life split apart. My mum was crying, her face was red. I couldn't help thinking about my poor brother lying somewhere dead. Later that night I tried to sleep, but that mountain was too steep, and that was the day the telegram came.
The sacrifice. Shoulder by shoulder, a rifle in one head, their feelings couldn't be bolder. Curious, scared, sad, it's time to go, lad. They watch their crying family, as they cautiously walk onto the ship. A backpack slung over their shoulder, their tummies were tied in knots and doing a flip. It was all gone. One last look at the city. It was a pity. They stood beside Australia. We wished them luck. If they made it back or not, they were heroes.
I would like to ask forward Major Lachlan Bromley of the Australian Army to please come forward and address the service. Major Lachlan Bromley joined the Australian Army Reserve in 1990 while still in Year 12. He graduated from officer training and was allocated to the Royal Australian Infantry Corps in 1993. He has served in a variety of roles around Australia, including Rifle Platoon Commander, Assault Pioneer Platoon Commander, Company Second in Command, Patrol Company Commander, Squadron Operation Officer, Officer Instructor, and Officer Commanding in a rifle company. He has served on full-time basis twice, including leading in several operations deployment of the Army and Navy personnel to Darwin for 6 months in 1918. In 2021, he graduated from the Australian Command and Staff College Reserve in Canberra. Major Bromley is currently posted to the Australian Army Career Management Agency as a career advisor, with responsibility for guiding over 80 infantry captains and majors across the country in their Army Reserve careers. In his civilian career, he works as an inventory analyst with FMG.
Thank you for that rather lengthy introduction, and I would add that there are many more like me that have a similar story that work with you and serve in the forces. Ms. Janine Person, teachers, staff, Mr. Kim Roberts, the Netherlands RSL, student counsellors, Mr. Matt Stishnell, Mr. Rob Cotterill, students, parents, family, friends and guests. It is an honour to be asked to provide the Anzac Day service address at Hollywood Primary School. As a parent of 2 children who have attended this wonderful school, it is indeed even more of an honour to be here. Thank you for asking me to come and talk to you this morning to commemorate Anzac Day, which most Australians recognise as one of the most important days of the year. Anzac. Now there's an unusual word. Originally it was not a proper word. It was a set of initials which stood for the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. And in 1915, 60,000 of those men, together with the British, Indian, Canadian and French soldiers, were sent to fight in a part of Turkey known as the Gallipoli Peninsula. It was because of the way those Australians and New Zealanders fought and the way that they faced the hardships and dangers which confronted them that the initials became a word, Anzac, which is today respected in Australia, New Zealand and around the world. Their actions forged what became known as the Anzac spirit, and that spirit has been the driving force behind all servicemen and women ever since, in France after Gallipoli, throughout the world in World War II, Korea, Malaysia, Borneo, Vietnam, Timor-Leste, Iraq and Afghanistan, many of which happened long before you were all born. It is also present in the peacekeeping operations our service people undertake today. Currently, approximately 3,300 servicemen and women from the Australian Navy, Army and Air Force, which make up the Australian Defence Force, are deployed on 20 operations overseas within Australia to protect Australia and its national interests. Of these, approximately 600 ADF members are actively protecting Australia's borders and offshore maritime interests. Countries and regions include the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, South Sudan and Mali in Africa, the Southwest Pacific and Northeast Asia. Our roles are many and include securing Australia's borders and resources, contributing to global security through close cooperation and friendship with allies and through United Nations peacekeeping operations, providing humanitarian and disaster relief operations in our region, which you'll all be familiar with. In meeting these challenges, Australian Defence Force men and women embrace this Anzac spirit. It is part of us, particularly for those who wear the uniform or who have worn it. But what does the Anzac spirit mean? And what should it mean to you? I believe it is a short word for a number of qualities which all of us, not just the men and women serving in the Navy, Army and Air Force, can usefully apply in our everyday lives. The Anzac spirit represents a sense of purpose and direction. The original Anzacs knew what they had to do. They knew of the dangers and the difficulties. But they got down and did not let those difficulties stop them from obeying their orders. It is true that the whole Gallipoli campaign did not achieve what was hoped for. But the soldiers on the ground stayed until their leaders decided it was time to withdraw. They knew that they had to work together to succeed. You can apply this in your everyday lives. You know what work you have to do at school and what jobs your parents may have set you to do about the house. No matter what difficulties you may think are in the way, think of the Anzacs and others who have followed them and push the difficulties to one side and get your task done. Do it because you can. Secondly, the Anzac spirit represents an acceptance of responsibility. This is another quality you should apply in your everyday lives. Take responsibility for everything you do. It is easy to say, I did that, or that's my work, when everything goes right. We all know that sometimes things do not go right. Sometimes you do something which is against the wishes of your parents or teachers. So remember the Anzac spirit and take responsibility for what you are doing. The Anzac spirit also includes a sense of compassion. In other words, being kind and considerate. This has been summed up in the Australian experience as mateship, which means to watch out for your mate, help him or her at all times, and don't poke fun at other people at school because they may have had some misfortune or come from a different part of the world. So these three simple things are what we mean when we talk about Anzac spirit. Another word you can apply to this same spirit is unselfishness. Now I, like every other person, hopes that Australia will never be involved in another war, and that you will never be called upon to experience such a terrible thing. But you should use these things I've talked about: a sense of purpose, acceptance of responsibility, a sense of compassion, and unselfishness, not only while you're at school, but through whatever you do in your lives. If you do this, you'll be keeping the faith of those who put the word Anzac into our language, and you will be helping to make sure that the Anzac spirit is always a part of life in Australia. Lastly, I'd just like to say that unfortunately most of our older veterans are no longer with us. I do see we have some here, but please, this Anzac Day, spare a thought that many of our veterans are actually quite young these days.
Thank you, Major Bromley. The laying of a wreath during our ceremony is a symbol of our respect for those men and women that have served our country. The use of rosemary and poppies symbolizes remembrance, bravery, and victory, as they were flowers that grew in both Gallipoli and France. I would like to invite Miss Burson and Mr. Matt Stitchner to come forward and lay a wreath on behalf of Hollywood Primary School and community, followed by our dignitaries, guests, and Hollywood students and families.
The Ode of Remembrance is taken from Lawrence Binyon's poem For the Fallen. I would like to invite Kim Roberts to present the ode.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. The last post traditionally marked the end of the working day for the soldiers. The last post will be played. This will be followed by a minute's silence to reflect on the contribution that the Anzacs have made to our lives. Please stand quietly.
Lest we forget.
Please be seated. Our assembly will close with Miss Brockman leading the Hollywood School Choir singing Blow, Bugle, Blow.
Santa falls across the world, and snowy summers old and story. The moonlight shakes across the lakes, and the world that around lives in glory. Blow, bugle, blow, send the world echoes flying, flying. And answer echoes, answer, dying, dying. Oh, I'll go here, and thin and clear from the glowing. Oh, sweet and far from cliff and star, hear the echoes of old faintly blowing. Blow, bugle, blow, send the wild echoes flying, flying. And answer echoes, answer, dying, But though they die in Norwich side, they faint on hill or field or river. Our echoes roll from song to song, and go forever and ever. Blow, bugle, blow, send the wild echoes flying, flying. And answer echoes, answer, dying, dying. Blow, bugle, blow, send the wild echoes flying, flying. And answer echoes, answer,
Thank you for attending our Anzac service. Thank you, special guests, Hollywood families, staff, and students for your attendance. Special guests are invited to join us for a light breakfast under the fig tree. Children, please wait and listen to your teachers and allow special guests to leave first.